This video I'm going to show you the technique that I use to blur faces using DaVinci Resolve version 19. So the first thing that I do after dragging the clip onto the workspace while on the Cut tab is I move the space dividers around to maximize the preview window, which makes this easier to work. Now I'm going to cut this clip where I want the face blur to start and end so I can scrub the timeline with this top or bottom playhead. The top playhead shows the entire clip while the bottom one will depend on how much zoom you have set. So I will get to where I want to cut the video at the beginning of the face blur by fine-tuning the frame with the back and forward arrow keys. And once I'm happy with the position, I will hold down the Control key and press the B key for blade, and that will split the clips right where I'm at, which you can see better after I move the playhead down the timeline. Now I want to show how I do the same thing from the Edit workspace, so I'll move the playhead back to my last edit and click on the Edit tab at the bottom. But first I move the space dividers around again to maximize the preview window here as well. This will help make it easier to place the blur effect directly over top of my face so it's not sticking out past it as I move around. So now I click past where I want the end of the blur to be, and then I just move back frame by pressing the back arrow key until I barely start to see the side of my face. And you can also switch to the blade tool by clicking on the icon just below the player controls. Then you can just click anywhere near the playhead to cut the clip there, or any other place on the timeline to cut elsewhere. The arrow icon will switch you back to it, or simply press the A key for the arrow and the B key for the blade tool. So now that I have the clip cut where I want to blur my face, I'm going to go down and click on the color tab at the bottom. Here I can see my clip separated by the cuts I made, so I need to make sure that I have the part of the video I want to blur my face selected. Then I'll go up top and click the enhanced viewer icon. And you can zoom in and out with the scroll wheel on your mouse if it has one. So the three features I'll be working with now are the shapes, the tracker, and the blur. And starting with the shapes, I want to click on the circle shape, which will pop up on my screen for editing. Just over under transform, I can change the size with my desired number here. And I can create an oblong circle by changing the aspect a little higher or lower than the size I set. The pan number will move the circle to the left or right, and the tilt number will move it up or down. And the rotate number will spin the circle around. So I'll set everything back to their defaults and demonstrate the softness number, but I need to create the blur first in order to see the effect it has. Now I'll go up and click on the blur icon, and I want to adjust the radius numbers to create the blur effect I like to use. Maxing the graph out is still too low of a setting for me, so I just set it to 8, and I'm happy with that look. So clicking on the shapes icon, I can now mess around with the softness of the edges until I'm happy with how it looks for the size of the head I want to blur. First I'll try a 5, but it's too small, so I'll go up to 8 and drag the blur over to my head. Then I'll go down and click on the Edit tab to see how it will look on video. I'm not happy with that look yet though, so I'll go back over and click on the color tab again to adjust my settings. So I set the softness to a 3 and then check it out on the Edit tab, but I'm not happy with that either, so I set it at 8 as well, and then take a look at that. I decide that I like that look, so it's time to move on to the tracking tool, which will move the blur along with my head. But first I'm going to set my blur pan and tilt to a more rounded number to make it easier to reset everything. And after I do that, I'll go up and click on the tracker icon. Now again, if you are in the enhanced viewer mode, you can switch back and forth to choose clips using this icon with the 4 arrows in each corner just above the preview window. So from here, the first thing I want to show is the main controls in the header of the tracker window. Starting with the track 1 frame forward control. This will allow you to step through the frames while tracking one by one, but I don't find it very useful in clip mode. Since this tracking is off, I'm going to reset everything by clicking on previous clip and then next clip, which will quickly set me to the beginning of my blur clip. Then I'll go up and click on the clear all tracking points icon, which will remove all my tracking data. Now I'm going to show the track forward control, which doesn't work well with a head when it's constantly turning through the shot. You can see how it stops tracking right away, even if I make the circle smaller so it can track more of the head. Next I'll show how to track after the beginning of the clip for when you have a larger head that will be easier to track near the middle or end. So I will move the playhead near the end of the clip where my head will be a little bit bigger to track, then move the blur object over to cover my face. And from here, I'll switch over to shapes where I can round up the pan and tilt numbers to make it easier for me to reset. So now I will click on the icon with the 2 arrows facing away from each other to use the track forward and reverse control, which will track the clip forward until the end, and then go back to the starting point to track in reverse. It stops tracking while going back to the beginning though, so I stop it and reset everything. It also completely reshaped my circle, so now I'll explain why that happened. These settings at the top with check boxes are why everything got so distorted. I had this 3D setting checked, so it tried to turn the blur object when it thought my head turned as well, so that is mainly why it ended up looking so oblong. So let's uncheck that and see how well it tracks without the 3D setting. I'll click the track forward control, and now you can see the circle doesn't get so distorted while it tracks through to the end of the video clip. So let's reset everything and see what happens when I uncheck the rotate setting. Notice how the vertical indicator doesn't twist this time without the rotation enabled. I'll reset everything again and uncheck the zoom setting, and you can see how the blur circle will not grow without it as my head gets bigger in the shot. So hopefully now that you better understand these tracking controls, let me show you frame mode, which is how I like to create my blur effect on heads. If you look at the blur circle, you will notice that there's a red dot in the center to indicate that you are in frame mode. So I'm going to reset everything to start at the beginning of the clip, but this time I'll have 3D, rotate and zoom turned off while using frame tracking. Now whenever you move the blur around, it will create a keyframe that the circle will morph over to from the last. So what I like to do is go through and evenly distribute the keyframes, and then go back in between each to fine-tune the motion. You can zoom into your tracker window at the bottom of it, so I will do that until the last keyframe I created is just outside of the window. Then I go up top left to zoom the video into 200% and hold down the scroll wheel on my mouse to reposition the video where I'll be working. Now back down in the tracker window, I just move the playhead to each marker and then drag the blur object over to cover my head, which creates a new keyframe. I will do this for each marker up until I get to the second keyframe I created. Then I scrub the playhead and adjust the blur object in between as needed where my head still shows. It took me a while to figure this method out, but it's the fastest way I can blur my head when I can't get clip tracking to work properly. So once I have in between my first marker keyed, I zoom the tracker window and preview back out, and then go down and click on the Edit tab to see how it looks without the node lines. Before playing through, I'll back it up just before the blur object shows up. And I'm happy with how that looks, so once the blur motion stops, I'll go back down and click on the Color tab to key the rest of the clip up. I use the same technique as I just showed. I set a reference keyframe on the next marker when zoomed all the way out of the tracker window, and then zoom into that area to create more keyframes on the new markers. If the head that you need to blur doesn't get any bigger, you can also just keep scrolling over and setting keyframes until you get to the end of the clip. I drive towards the camera at the conclusion of this video so my head gets bigger, which means I need to increase the size of the blur object at the end, so I zoom all the way out to do that once I get to that point. Now that I think I have it done, I go back down to click on the Edit tab and then up to click play so I can see how it looks. Hopefully this video has helped, and feel free to ask any questions that you still may have in the comments. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe for more quick and on-point videos.